A lot of you know me in different capacities. I know the mayor over here has known me for lots and lots of years, about 26 years. And you know me because I'm a local person. You know, my business that I bought and ran for 26 years, my husband and I had, was right down the street on St. Pete Beach here. We had a convenience store and a delicatessen. And so what I can tell you is I know small business. And I love talking to the chambers because we talk the same language. Chambers are all about small business. And I just spent the last 5 years working for the Clearwater Regional Chamber of Commerce, working for their government affairs, and working to help small business navigate the bureaucratic process of local government, of state government, and federal government. So, so I feel like I'm among friends here, and I appreciate that. What I do know is that what we need in Washington is somebody who knows us and understands us. Somebody who knows Pinellas County and understands Pinellas County, and our small business and our uniqueness. But more than even that, we need someone that we know is going to fight for us. And we can count on it. And that's what I'm here to offer you. For those of you that know me, you know that I have fought for our children for years, ensuring that they had a safe place to go when government was deciding to arrest them at school. And we're local governments, we're going to put curfews in and arrest our kids and not let them have jobs past 9 o'clock at night. If you remember all that, if you've been here that long. And so we opened up teen centers to make sure they had a safe place to go and they weren't getting arrested and they weren't getting in trouble. And we were arresting them at school, and we came up with good, solid solutions that worked on public-private partnerships to make sure that our children's futures weren't being ruined. And that's critically important, that we don't ruin our children's future. But more than that, let's talk about St. Pete Beach and Pinellas County. And several years ago, when the state of Florida was going to put a constitutional amendment that would have devastated the economy of this state. Y'all remember Amendment 4? Y'all remember hometown democracy? And nobody knows that better than this city right here. And because of the local ordinance this city put in, when we let government take over and get overreaching and go too far, it shuts down our economy, and that's what we're experiencing. And I want somebody who's going to say, no, we're not going to allow it, but I also want to know that someone's going to fight for us. And how are we going to know that? We know that by track records. And when I look at candidates, I say, you know what, don't give me all the platitudes and all that. Tell me what you've done and what you're going to do for me. So let's talk about what I've done for business and for the economy. And when Amendment 4 got put on that ballot, and this city went into an economic recession before the rest of the country did because their local city put that on their charter, I went out and in 4 months I did more than 70 presentations, debates, and interviews to make sure that that constitutional amendment did not pass. Now, it wasn't my job. I didn't have to do it, but I knew that if that became a state constitution, that Florida would be doomed as far as our economy and what would happen. We still have boarded up resorts on this city, on the Gulf of Mexico, just because of the local level. So you want to talk about a track record. And 5 years at the Clearwater Regional Chamber of Commerce protecting businesses and promoting economic development. I've got 5 years of writing policy. There's not another candidate here that has written policy and then had to vote for it. And let me tell you, those elected officials in the room, you know what I'm talking about. It's hard to vote for something when you have to analyze it all the way. And you can look at my track record and you know. She's written policy, she's voted for policy, and she's written and voted for good policy that's good for jobs, good for economic development, that's going to help promote our economy and our jobs. That's the only way we fix it, is repealing the regulations and make sure we have jobs and that we can take home more in our paychecks. And that's what I offer to you, is that experience. Thank you.
And we have Mr. Mark Bircher.
Thank you, ma'am. Certainly appreciate this opportunity. My name is Mark Bircher. my background is courtesy of the American people. I received an education for obligation of 5 years of military service. I stayed in for 12. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the people. Stayed in another 21 years with the Marine Corps Reserve. Retired in 2009, and I've been an airline pilot for 25 years while I was staying in the reserves. And I have a law practice. Limited only to pro bono at this point. About 12 years ago, the airlines weren't doing too well, so I went into had to have an alternate plan, so I went to law school, and fortunately I've been able to just take the cases that I want to take because of the interest. So that's my background. In the Marine Corps, I was very fortunate. I haven't written law, but when you're the second in command of 50,000 people in the world's largest fighting organization, the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, believe me, you make policy. It's amazing what 50,000 people can do. Most of it good, most of it forward in combat, but in the rear, my job was to get people ready to go forward to Iraq and Afghanistan. So I'm used to running big organizations. I was in command of the 4th Marine Aircraft Wing. I was in command of the Marine Forces South. So I've been around large organizations, and I understand how the relationship with government after 33 years in the federal service. The common theme for my background is service, and that's what I think I bring to the constituents here. When you serve sailors and Marines, when you serve your customer as an airline pilot, when you serve your client as a lawyer, you're welded at the hip to the notion of service. But there's another kind of service I want to bring up here too, and that's the service we should expect from our federal government. And that service is a consequence many times of our representation. And I'm not satisfied with that representation. And we remember that the states created the federal government for one purpose, and that's to serve us, to serve the states. Well, in a staggering role reversal, I'm not feeling that relationship is the same anymore. I feel that the federal government in many cases lost their way, which is our fault for not minding our store. I see bureaucracy, inefficiency, regulation, compliance, debt, and deficit. I think that needs to be turned around, mostly because it's unsustainable. But here's the important thing to the chamber in my view. There was a revolution a couple hundred years ago in this country where the idea that you could change your station through hard work, that you could become a landowner, that you could be a business owner, you weren't stuck in old Europe where you were going to be whatever you were. And the purpose of that federal government was to print money, common defense, foreign policy, and a post office. And what does that mean? That means business. Common defense means you could run your farm, your merchant store without worrying about being invaded. Foreign policy was to keep your markets open. Printing money was so you'd have currency to trade. And the post office was to keep our communication. So remember what all that function was for you. It wasn't to regulate, it wasn't to take money from you. And when I see for every dollar that we spend running the bureaucracy, in my opinion, an inefficient one, there were 4 departments at the time of the framing: State, Treasury, Judiciary, and Defense. Now there's 15 cabinets and 6 equivalents, and if you go to USA.gov, there's 463 agencies and organizations. It's a lot of overhead. You're business people, you know what that means. I think we can do better. Essentially, the platform I have is to transition back to the states where the Constitution says these functions belong, with the exception of a couple of things. One is Social Security, another one is Medicare. People paid into Medicare and Social Security. They have a property interest in it. It was a promise made by government. It needs to be protected. That is a solemn promise. I think the government owes you. I think your representative owe you. So that's my platform. Control spending, return our liberty, increase our business. Thank you very much.
And Mr. David Jolly.
Hey, thank you, folks, for having us this morning. Listen, this is a great day for Pinellas County. Every time we have a forum like this, I say we have 3 great candidates in this primary race. You can't go wrong with this. We have 3 Pinellas County residents on the Republican side. The Democrats can't say that on their side. So this is a great day. I'm proud to be up here with these 2 folks here. Listen, I'm down the road here in Indian Shores. I'm proud to see my mayor, Bob Lawrence, who on day 1 endorsed our campaign and has been out supporting supporting us. Thank you, Mayor, for that. Bill Briakis as well, I know, I believe a former member of the Chamber Board here. Nice to see you this morning. I had the opportunity to work alongside Howard Congressman Bill Young for nearly 20 years in a variety of capacities. Essentially my first job out of Congress, and then after I left government service in private counsel with him until he passed away. This race isn't about who was closest to Mr. Young. It's not about the fact that I worked for Mr. Young, but it does speak to experience and qualifications to make an impact on behalf of Pinellas County and these communities on day one. We are applying for a job here, and I'm asking that you consider our qualifications. The opportunity that I had to work alongside Mr. Young, I believe, came to me. I'm a person of faith as a result of providence. The truth is, when I got to Washington in 1995, having never been north of Tennessee, I wanted to work for one of the young firebrand Republicans that was part of the '94 revolution. And I ended up getting a job with Mr. Young. And I thought at the time, at 21 years old, thinking I knew everything, well, I don't want to work for this old guy that's already been in office for 20 years. The truth is, I had no idea the experience that I was about to embark on and how it would change my life to work for one of the greatest legislators the United States Congress has ever seen. I believe that. As a result of having worked alongside him, I'd like to talk about 4 things this morning that are central to my platform. We can talk about more, or talk more in detail perhaps during the question and answer. But 4 things that I think are important to this county and to the beach communities. First, it starts with jobs. We know Mr. Young left us a legacy of having invested in jobs, both skilled and unskilled jobs here in Pinellas County. Maintaining the economic development, maintaining the quality of life, maintaining wages here in Pinellas County. He did a lot of that through investment in the defense industry. I would be proud to carry on that legacy, and it's something that I believe, based on my experience, understanding the federal budget process, knowing how we can continue to sustain both skilled and unskilled jobs here in Pinellas County, that would be something that I would step in on day one and believe I would bring unique qualifications to work on. Flood insurance is something I know we'll talk about this morning. I know the other candidates supported delaying bigger waters as well. We must delay bigger waters, but frankly, that's not the answer. A bad law today is a bad law 4 years from now, and simply delaying it for 4 years isn't the answer. We each have different ideas. I have proposed, at least in concept, the idea of a national natural disaster insurance program. Until the Brandis-Ahern bill can really take effect and bring in private sector solutions here in the state, I'd like to see us examine a national flood insurance policy that better aggregates the risk across the country, from earthquakes on the west coast, ice in the northwest, to tornadoes in the plain states, to the northeast snowstorms, to the southeast floods and hurricanes. Let's aggregate the risk and stabilize that market. Thirdly, offshore oil drilling. I am proud to support the current ban of 230 miles. I don't think we need any encroachment. The current moratorium, I believe, exists through 2022. That is something we should maintain. It's important. The military mission line buffer on top of the already 125-mile ban, we have to keep that. And then finally, beach renourishment. I'm proud to support beach renourishment. It's something we have to do. We must do it. I understand all of the studies. I know that erosion occurs 2 to 3 times faster based on artificial beach renourishment than natural, but we don't have a choice. Our local economy, our homeowners here on the beach rely on it. There's a federal-state share. Ultimately, given the restrictions and budgeting on the federal side, I think the state will have to continue to increase its share of beach renourishment money, but at the end of the day, it is something we have to look at. So, listen, I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning, and I ask that you consider our campaign. Thank you.
Okay, now to the question and answer portion of this wonderful candidate forum. We will ask the candidates to answer the questions from their seat, if you don't mind, and that'll just save us from jumping up Jack in the Box all morning. And these questions have come from our government committee at the chamber. First question, and why don't we start this time, since I started with Kathleen for the intro, I'll start with Mr. Bircher on this one. You have 3 minutes to answer the question, hence answer the question, not 3 minutes to go around the question. What do you recommend needs to be done to solve the fiscal issues in Washington, D.C.?
3 things. Redefine the purpose of our federal government and what the purpose is not in our federal government. That's written in the Constitution. Understand the notion that there isn't $1 in Washington, D.C. to give us that we don't first put there through taxation or even the more pernicious policy of writing debt. And third, spending accountability, which we had for the first 124 years of this republic prior to the 16th Amendment. For example, in 1908, Teddy Roosevelt sent 16 United States Navy battleships around the world, 14,000 sailors. There was not a personal income tax. The federal government can do what they need to do if they stay in their lane. And that lane is as clear as English can be written. Redefine the purpose, what it is not. Understand there's no wealth which we don't first put there. And spending accountability for our representatives.
Thank you. And Mr. Jolly.
In the theme of three things, I'd say three things are going to help us on this one. One, economic growth, which frankly is creating an environment in which the private sector grows and thus creates additional revenue. I'm not for additional revenue through tax increases of any kind, but I think economic growth, as we saw Bill Clinton likes to say he balanced the budget in 1999, I think Bill Gates balanced the budget in 1999 because we had an internet economy that increased revenues for the federal government. We can use across-the-board cuts at the top-line level with the discretionary budget across departments. I don't think across-the-board cuts are good at what we call subcategory spending. But listen, I think every federal department can use a constriction. And I think it's responsible to suggest that federal agencies should go back to their budgets and figure out where the cost savings are. Ultimately, though, the only way to balance the budget is going to be entitlement spending. Around 1960, I believe entitlement spending, that's mandatory spending on programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the debt. Around 1960, and Adam, don't politifact me on this, it was about 35% of our federal budget, somewhere in that range, give or take 5. Right now, spending on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the debt, sits around 65 to 70% of our federal budget. That growth curve will lead us to, in our lifetime, seeing mandatory spending consume every dollar that our federal treasury takes in annually. Now, this is important, and I appreciate Mark's comments earlier about Social Security and Medicare. I do not think that we can change the current promised benefits for participants in the program, and frankly, for folks like the three of us up here. I like to say I am not too young to rely on promises that Washington has made to me. I have made a financial plan based on promises that Washington has made to me. Individuals in this room, an individual should not suffer because Washington is bad at math. But part of being a fiscal conservative also says we're going to take responsibility. And what that means is we are going to account for the out-year unfunded obligation of our entitlement programs. Whatever that number is. Some would say it's 50 trillion, some would say it's 100 trillion. We're going to own that, we're going to put it on our balance sheet. We're going to say this is actually the amount of money that we have promised to individuals. We're going to own that. If we have to debt that, we debt that, but we're going to own that. And then we're going to turn around to future participants of programs and say, now let's talk about a new program that's more actuarially sound, upon which you can make, with certainty, a life financial plan for your own self.
And Kathleen.
Solving the fiscal issues. I think first off, since you and I, every city, every state has to work with a balanced budget, why shouldn't Washington? I think absolutely we should move in the direction of having some kind of a balanced budget. And it might take us a little while to get there, but I think that needs to be our goal and that needs to be our objective. I also believe that we have to have pro-business policies. Right now, government is so overreaching and we've got so many regulations that it's hurting business. And there's no certainty. Businesses can't grow because there's no certainty. They have no idea what's going to happen next year. And every time they think, okay, this year I'm going to get hit, our federal government says, you know, we're going to postpone it hitting business till next year. So can business move forward? No, because there's still so much uncertainty. And so we have to start pulling back all of these overreaching regulations. And when I was with the Chamber for the last year and a half, I've been working with Washington trying to get them to rein in just the Dodd-Frank. And let's take title companies alone. The first year they put regulations from Dodd-Frank, and they're passing these bills without even knowing what the policies are going to be, and when the rubber hits the road, what is going to happen. But Dodd-Frank, first year of regulations, cost one title company, we talked about the analysis and what it cost, 17% of their bottom line. It costs just the title company who's not even regulated by Dodd-Frank, for training, for reporting, and auditing. That gets passed on to you and me. The second year of Dodd-Frank regulations, 22% additional, 22% to their bottom line cost, who isn't even regulated by Dodd-Frank, and who's paying for it? You and I. They've now put in a whole nother year. They're not even done writing the new regulations for that act. And every time they do it, they're taking away our ability for capital venture. They're taking away our ability for businesses to grow and prosper. And until we stop this overarching regulation on our business, we cannot guarantee that our Americans can have jobs and that our businesses can thrive. And small business, where are we going to be with small business? Because I'll tell you, that was my livelihood. That was my father's livelihood. That was my grandfather's livelihood, with small business. And small business is going away. And we need to stop that. So absolutely, we need to rein in the regulations. We need to balance that budget, and we need to come up with pro-business policies that are going to help grow our economy and ensure that every American can have a job and that we can compete globally. That's what it's going to take. Thank you.
Okay, our next question. Could you elaborate on how you truly understand the value tourism has on our economy and how pristine our beaches are and its correlation to a thriving tourism economy? And we'll start with Mr. Jolly.
Listen, this is a parochial issue for all of us in this room, and I understand as a fiscal conservative, most people would say, well, we can't invest in beach renourishment. We have to, because our local economy relies on it. Offshore oil drilling, frankly, within the Republican Party, most people who live outside of the Gulf states would say we have to expand oil drilling because we need an energy platform that includes expanded oil drilling. We can't do that. Listen, we are choosing who to elect from District 13 to represent Pinellas County, Florida. The Pinellas County economy relies on those two things. And we have to defend that, and we have to elect somebody that defends that. We know that tourism is the main driver of our economy here locally. We know that. We have to protect that. It's right before our eyes. I'm proud in this instance to have had the opportunity to work alongside Congressman Young. As the money was provided for beach renourishment, I believe there was about $100 million over the course of maybe the last 10 years, but I know the number topped $100 million sometime in 9 or 10 for beach renourishment. It's not the long-term solution to keep going to the federal government, but right now it's the only solution, and it's something we have to continue to do.
Thank you. And we'll move to Kathleen.
Tourism is the #1 industry in Florida. And across the nation, tourism is very important. And I agree, offshore drilling is absolutely not, and there's many reasons why we don't go for offshore drilling. And if you all remember, we had 2 barges collide right at the mouth of Tampa Bay. And that hit just right here. And the news made it sound like our whole state was covered in oil, and it impacted us. So absolutely no, we are not, or I am not, pro-oil drilling. And again, you all know my stance on that because I've been in this community and been fighting that for a long time. But tourism is very important to us, and we need to maintain that. We need to maintain our pristine beaches. But our pristine beaches is not just, when we talk about beach renourishment. Now, I helped bring home beach renourishment just this year. And originally the money that the state was going to allocate was only for Treasure Island, but we were able to work with Congressman Young's office. And we were able to work a deal to be more efficient and more effective, and we brought in 2 cities. So you know that I've been fighting for beach renourishment for this community, not only as a state, but as a mayor, I was fighting for that as well, and at my role in the chamber. But it's critical, not just for our pristine beaches, it's critical to protect our infrastructure. That is what's most critical. I mean, it absolutely is critical. We need it for our pristine beaches. And many people say, oh, we're subsidizing the hotels. But that's not true. We're protecting our infrastructure, and it's critical. And we have to preserve that. We have to ensure that our tourism industry stays thriving. It's what we can count on. And it is so fragile. It is so fragile. We've had too many things where we get impacted by weather, by oil ships, by oil drilling. That impacts our tourism in the state, and we need to protect it, grow it. Now going on to Panama, we have more flights coming in. We need to promote this. We have the greatest country in the world, and we need to be promoting tourism globally. I mean, I love what Copa Airlines is doing for us, and we need to keep doing it. We need to keep growing it.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Okay. This one's a lively topic.
Mark?
Oh, I'm sorry. Gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm anxious about this next question. So, yes. Mark.
I couldn't agree with what's been stated here. Tourism beaches. If you imagine a picture of Florida on the map, I think we can point to the physical shape of Florida and what's at risk as opposed to the others that there's just different metrics involved. Ours is, it's been stated already, so that's beyond reasonable dispute that our beaches and our tourism, every business kind of rests on that foundation in my view. I would submit maybe I have a little bit of a different plan. I've lost confidence in federal solutions, whether they're healthcare or mortgage insurance or anything else. I think the states and the collaboration of the governors of like-minded, of like interests would be a far greater, more efficient mechanism to solve these issues. For example, every dollar you send to Washington to come back to the state to help you, it doesn't look like a dollar anymore. It looks like a lot less than a dollar. So I've lost confidence that the federal government is the answer for our problems. I think we get better solutions here, which doesn't mean we can't collaborate with other states on these issues of beaches and tourism. We cannot take the risk of the oil, in my view. I do think that we would be better here using our own entrepreneurial spirit to solve these problems and our own resources in a more efficient manner than the federal government. That's probably the difference in my view to protect beaches and tourism.
Thank you. Okay. As we all know, we can skip ahead here in the flood insurance issue. We already know what the issue is, and if you don't, call me on my cell phone and I'll give you a one-on-one. And we already know from the press that we have a recommended delay. So we're going to jump ahead here. We'd like to know, if you were elected, what is your recommended solution to the NFIP issue? And now we can start with Mr. Joe. No, I'm sorry, Kathleen.
You know, what we need to do long-term, I believe, is allow the private industry to take care of that. And I believe that the competitiveness in the private industry can do that. My concern is a lot of the solutions that have been proposed is that they're not looking at business. And we have to make sure that, because I believe some of the policies that are already being presented are not looking at small business. And we have to make sure that the small business is protected just like everyone else. And we don't start adopting plans years in advance that we don't know what it looks like. And that's what Washington seems to be really good at. And, you know, I contend, we got 3 mayors in this room. Can any of you adopt a law without knowing what it's going to look like? We can't do that anymore. So we need to come up with a policy that's going to protect our businesses, our homeowners, and even our second homeowners. But I think private business is really truly going to be the most effective way to go versus subsidies.
And Mr. Bircher.